There you go.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Eric Corbin. I'm the Deputy Director at the Butler County Board of Elections, and I'm also a precinct executive on the Central Committee. And we've got some high-level issues or methods, processes that go on at the Board of Elections that I want to go over. And this will prepare you to know how the elections in Ohio work and to give you some more information about the safeguards that we already have in place and why we can trust the results of the election on election night. So I'm going to jump right in. And if you guys have some questions, you can always put those in the chat and we'll try to answer those at the end. All right. We want to start off first with the structure of the Board of Elections. We have 4 board members, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. And as many of you will notice, that's not an odd number. So we're going to have at least one person from the other party join the other 2 to vote to pass anything during a board meeting. I've sat through many board meetings over the years, and I've worked at the Board of Elections, and almost all the time, it's 4 board members voting in favor for what we need to do to get the election done. Very rarely is there a disagreement, maybe at the beginning, but we always work together and we come through and we say, what does the law say? And we follow that. And we try to do the best that we can for the voters and make it easy to vote and, of course, hard to cheat. There are 22 full-time staff members at the Board of Elections. That includes myself as the Deputy Director and the Director. And then we have 20 other staff members. We're evenly split. We have 2 IT people. We have multiple people from both parties who do our ballot programming and website maintenance and things like that. So we've always got that parity in the office. Another good example is when a ballot is returned to our office, someone's voted through absentee. When we check that ballot in and make sure it has all the right information, we have 2 people sitting at a table, 1 Democrat and 1 Republican, pulling that ballot out of the envelope and setting it aside because there's no sense in looking at it because we've got a stack of so many that we got to get through that we just put that aside and keep working. The reason you're seeing 2 keys on the slide there also goes to show the way that our Board of Elections office is set up. So we've got some specific rooms, the warehouse where we store all of our voting equipment. We have a tabulation room. We also have what we call the vault and the server room. And these are all rooms where you can't gain access to that room by yourself. You have to have a Democratic key and a Republican key to get into that door. So again, this is another way that we maintain election integrity throughout the process, is making sure that somebody from both parties is there during every step so that you can keep an eye on each other and make sure that everything is on the up and up. And then a side note to that too is we're regular coworkers. We all work together. Of course, we know where everyone stands politically, but we do our best not to bring that into the office. So even though I've got some Republican coworkers, we all get along just fine. We've got families, houses, cars, mortgages, and regular everyday life things to worry about. So our office works really well together. One of the best resources for the folks in Butler County is going to be the Board of Elections website. So what I have here is a screenshot of my voter record from a couple years ago, and it still looks the same today. But I want to give you guys the tools to check your voter registration, find your polling location, and some other information. So I'll start up here in the top left. You can see my name, and I blacked out my address, but you would see the address that you're registered to vote at, and that can be really important for anyone who's moved to make sure that they're currently registered at the right spot. If you've moved recently, you can't just go to your old polling location. You need to go to the correct polling location, and you need to update your registration. We're going to talk a little bit more about registration later on. You can see underneath my name, my absentee ballot status for the 2022 primary election. So if you're voting through the mail, this is where you're going to go to check that we've received your application. You can see what date we've mailed your ballot to you, and you can see what date you've returned it to us and that we've checked it in. Also, if there was any issue with your ballot, there would be an extra line there with a challenge that would say something like you forgot to sign your absentee ballot envelope, or the personal identifying numbers that you put on your ballot don't match. So that information is there, and we want that to be easily accessible for folks. But of course, if there's an issue with any voter's ballot like that, they're required to get a notification, not just to their Butler County address where they're registered to vote, but if they are voting from out of state, they're out of town during the election time, we're also going to send that notice to them there where the ballot was also sent. Towards the middle, you can see my polling location. So this is always wonderful information for people to have, especially close to election day. You can click to get a map and to get directions there. We've got my district information over here. You can see the precinct that you're in. Not everybody knows the precinct that they're in. You can see a person's party affiliation. Of course, mine says Democrat. You might see Republican or no party there as well. Most of the voters in Butler County are not affiliated with a party, about 70%. You can see my Ohio Senate district, my Ohio House district. So if you're wondering which of those wonderful candidates you're going to vote for, you can check and see what House district you're in. And of course, all of Butler County is in the 8th Congressional District. Right below that, you'll see some links to a sample ballot. And this is another really great tool as we come up to an election. When you're going to go vote, whichever of the 3 ways you choose to do it, we want you to have looked at your sample ballot, know what choices you're going to make. Because unfortunately, when a voter gets to the polling location or a voter gets to the early voting center, we can't help you in terms of interpreting the language of an issue or help you really with anything on the ballot. All we could do is literally read it as it is verbatim on the page. So if people come here and they take a second to look at that sample ballot, it's going to do you a lot of help so that you're not standing at the voting booth trying to figure out which way you want to go. Let's see. The Board of Elections website's also got a lot more information that you can do. So the first one here I've got is the voter lookup, and that's what we just saw. If you're going to go out and you want to do a walking list, you want to get to know people in your precinct, or if you just want to help out, you can always go there and you can download current records to see who's registered. You can download all kinds of lists. We've also, of course, got past results. Lots of people like to go through and look at the results of past elections. And we've got some election profiles as well. When we talk about an election profile, basically it's a summary of the election. So we like to put some information in there about what the turnout was, how many people voted absentee, how many people voted at the polls, and that type of information so we can compare across elections. We use it for our planning purposes at the board. So we know, obviously, this year is a presidential election, so we're going to be looking closer to 72% historically speaking in Butler County. But in an odd year election, we're going to be expecting about 20% turnout. So those election profiles might be something interesting for someone who really wants to dig deep into the data of the election. I've also got a little lockdown there with a .gov on there because that's something that we're working with some federal partners and the Secretary of State as well to encourage people to go to .gov websites to get their election information. If a website is .gov, it's going to be secure. You can know that the government is the one who is updating that website, and you can know that you're getting it from a secure source. So if you go to bcohio.gov or elections.bcohio.gov, you can get to the Board of Elections website. If you go to voteohio.gov, you can get to the Secretary of State's website as well. And again, be confident that the information on that page is correct. So registration obviously is really important, especially right now as we're encroaching on the registration deadline. Early voting starts on October the 8th. So anybody who wants to register to vote before this election is going to have to do so by 9 o'clock on October the 7th so that they have their registration in place 30 days before the election to comply with Ohio law. You can always register in person. You can register online at voteohio.gov. You can register through the mail or a designated agency. Those agencies are places like libraries, public high schools, the BMV, where you can get that registration card and leave it there with them, and they will return it to the Board of Elections. The easiest way for people to update their registration is to go online. It's instant. It's going to happen right away. We're going to see it, and that way you can be confident. You can get a tracking number, and you can go to our website the next day, search your name, and you're going to find yourself there, which is really great. So registration is really important, of course. And for that, we want to talk about the identification requirements that people are going to need. The best thing you can put on there is your driver's license number. When you look at your driver's license, there's a whole bunch of numbers on there, and we certainly have people often give us the wrong number. Driver's license number in Ohio is usually, I believe it is 2 letters followed by 6 numbers. So if you're finding a number that's not in that format, you haven't quite found the driver's license number, and you're going to want to look just a little further for that. You can also use the last 4 digits of your social security number as well. Registration, of course, is really important. Not only do we want people who are interested in voting to register, we're also always doing cancellation processes. Voters can do a self-cancellation. They can do that if they know that they're moving out of the county or out of the state. They can cancel their registration to make sure that our rolls are clean. In the Board of Elections, we call merging when we take a voter from one county to another.
What was he barking about?
There was a point where I lived in Hamilton
put my
County
salad in the fridge for me.
Can you please, hello, can you please mute your audio, please? We just heard somebody talk about putting something in the fridge.
Oh, that was me. I'm so sorry.
Please mute.
Perfect.
Go ahead, Aaron.
When I moved from Butler County to Hamilton County for a few years, I re-registered in Hamilton County, and the state system works together, and they say, hey, this person has the same name, the same date of birth, the same ID numbers, and those 2 things are connected up, and Hamilton and Butler County work together and say, yes, this person's living in Hamilton County. When I moved back to Butler County, the same process happened. I registered in Butler. The state system was able to look at that and say, hey, this person's moved from one county to another. And it made sure that I only had 1 active registration so that we don't have people active in 2 counties at the same time. Of course, we always get reports from the Ohio Department of Health and Vital Statistics because people pass away all the time, and we want to make sure that we have accurate voter rolls. So that's an automated process that goes on monthly at the Board of Elections. There's no need for anybody to take extra steps to bring in a death certificate unless, of course, they want to. They're perfectly permitted to. But there is a process in place to remove folks from the voter rolls as they pass away. In Ohio, people who are currently incarcerated are not eligible to vote. So that's another way that people can be canceled from the rolls because they have a new felony conviction and are currently incarcerated. Once they are finished their sentence, they are more than welcome to re-register to vote again in Ohio. Provisional voting is something that some people think is scary, but it's actually rather simple. If you go to check in on election day and for some reason your registration doesn't match, we're going to get you a provisional ballot because we want to make sure everybody has that opportunity to vote. And it also, of course, is a safeguard to keep people from voting twice. If someone was to request an absentee ballot, vote it and return it, of course, we're going to mark them in our poll books so that if they come on election day and try to vote again, we're going to say, nope, it looks like you've got an absentee ballot. We're going to give you this provisional ballot here. You can vote it, and we would determine if that's a second vote or not. But of course, we don't want people to be doing that. Usually provisional ballots are much simpler than that. It's just that somebody didn't update their registration. We often have people who get married and don't change their last name, or people who have simply just moved and haven't updated their address. In that case, the provisional ballot does 2 things. It registers you at your correct new address when you fill it out, and it also allows you to vote in the correct place. Because if you've not updated your registration and you go to the polling location and you're not registered there, we're not going to be able to create you a card to go onto the machine. So we can do that with the poll workers there. They'll know which ballot to give you and make sure that you're voting in the right place. If you're moving from one city in Butler County to a township or to another city, you want to vote on where you live. You don't want to be voting on the wrong ballot. And then provisional ballots, another important part about those is they are not counted on election night because the Board of Elections has not had a chance to verify those ballots. We need to go through, make sure that the person is who they say they are, make sure that they did not vote in another county, and make sure that they didn't vote an absentee ballot or something else was going on. Once we do all of that check on each provisional ballot, and of course, we're going to do 2 checks. We're going to have a Democrat check it and a Republican check it. And when everyone agrees, we're going to put that ballot either to be counted or to be rejected. The majority of our provisional ballots are counted because they're cast validly and they follow the rules. However, we do have some that don't count. One would be if you're not registered at all anywhere in the state and you're coming to vote on election day, unfortunately, it's just too late. So that's an issue where a ballot wouldn't be counted. Let's see. Precinct election officials, we can't have an election without them. They're absolutely integral to being able to run 85 polling locations to serve 250,000 voters. We are always recruiting for poll workers. And if you're free on election day and you really want to see the process up close and understand all the safeguards and things that we do, I encourage you to please go to the Board of Elections website, sign up to be a poll worker, get into the action and be involved. When we assign poll workers to polling locations, again, we keep that bipartisanship. We make sure that we have Democrats and Republicans sitting there checking our voters in, watching our machines, filling out our paperwork and our forms, and we make sure that we have that throughout the whole process so that we can be confident in what's going on at the polling locations. We also thankfully, they changed the law a year or so ago where we can use 17-year-olds who are even juniors in high school, which is they're great because they really balance out some of our other poll workers because, of course, they're just naturally comfortable with the equipment that we're using. The poll books are just iPads, so they seem to whiz through it, and they bring a lot of they bring a lot of value to our polling locations. I think we usually use about 200 students throughout the county on election day. We give our poll workers lots of training. There's only an election, usually once or twice a year. It's been 6 months since the last time a poll worker has been there. So we bring them back in, we refresh them, we give them updates. There's usually a change each year that we have to make sure everybody's on the same page because we want all our voters to be treated exactly the same. We've got online training for our returning poll workers. And we've got some in-person training, of course, for anybody who hasn't worked before. And we're going to make sure that when you come in, we give you everything. But man, do we give a lot of information out during those training classes. Our location supervisors one might call our super poll workers. They take on a little bit more responsibility. They take on quite a bit more responsibility, and they're responsible for setting up, tearing down the machines, reporting, and communicating with the Board of Elections if there's any issues on election day. So the experience for the poll worker is they're going to come to class. It's usually about 2.5 to 3 hours. They're going to come on Monday night before the election. They're going to set up the polling location for about 2 hours, make sure that everybody knows what roles they're going to do in the morning and have everything just nice and ready. On Tuesday, they show up at the early hour of 5:30. They work all day. They check in voters. They greet voters. They do provisional ballots. They get a chance to take a break. And they earn a little bit of extra cash, which everybody can always be happy about, is have a little bit extra money. But most of our poll workers aren't really doing it for the $200. They're doing it because they love their community and they want to be involved and they want to do their civic duty. Earlier this summer, the Butler County Board of Elections had an appreciation event for the poll workers that we use every election. And we were able to honor one poll worker who has worked in 54 elections just in Butler County, which is amazing. That's a huge commitment. I want to talk really briefly about candidates, just so people have an idea of what the process is as they go through. Pooling petitions basically means the candidate comes to our office and says, how do I run for township trustee? What do I need to do to be on a school board or to be a U.S. House representative? When they come in, we give them all kinds of information, checklist, petition papers that they're going to fill out, and we send them on their merry way and say, hey, if you have any questions, give us a call. Of course, campaign finance is an ongoing requirement that I don't really think fits into the scope of this presentation, but it's just important to know that candidates have to do that once they, if they're going to spend any money on their campaign, they have to pretty much comply with that requirement right away. Once the candidate's got their petitions, they're going to go around to friends and family, knock on doors, and collect those signatures. And once they have enough for their position, different offices have different signature requirements. So some of the school boards, you may need 150. A township trustee, you may only need 25. Then they're going to bring those petitions to the Board of Elections. They're going to file them with us, and we're going to check that they're filled out correctly, accurately, that that person lives in the district that they are running to hold office in, and make sure that all the people who sign those petitions, signatures and registrations match so that we can verify those. Once they're verified and they have enough signatures, the Board of Elections will certify that person to the ballot and put their name on for the election. At that point, candidates are going to go out and campaign and do their thing until election day, when they can watch the results start to come in when the polls close at 7:30. Another misconception that I like to clear up with people is about write-in candidates. For a write-in vote to actually count, it has to be for someone who has filed to be a write-in. So you don't have to worry. Mickey Mouse is not going to be elected to be your township trustee because Mickey Mouse is not a valid write-in candidate. And people write very creative things on that line. It is one of the things that gives us a little humor the day after the election when we look through those. There's a lot of information on this page, but what I want to convey is that there's 3 ways to vote in Ohio, and all of them are equally just as good, just as secure. It's about whatever's convenient or best for each individual voter. So if we look at that row about the mail voters, you can vote by mail starting the 29th day before the election. So the registration deadline is 30 days out. The absentee ballots can go out as early as 29 days. If you've already requested an absentee ballot, that's fantastic. It's going to go out on October the 8th. Of course, you can vote by mail anywhere. We can send that ballot wherever you like. And any voter in Butler County can do that, or any voter in Ohio. We are a no-fault state. So if you want to vote absentee, you don't need a reason. You don't need an excuse. All you have to do is fill out that application. And when you get that ballot, of course, it's going to come through the mail, and you're going to vote on paper. Another method is early in-person voting, which in Ohio only happens in one location per county, usually at the Board of Elections itself. In Butler County, of course, is at the Board of Elections, and the hours can be a little complicated. So generally, it is Monday to Friday from 8 to 5. This year being a presidential year, there are more hours available. So the first 2 weeks will be Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. The third week will be 8 to 6. With a Saturday and Sunday hours. Saturdays are from 8 to 4. Sundays are from 1 to 5. The fourth week before the election is the trickiest one. For the most part, it is 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. So it gives a little more time for people after work to get there, again, with those weekend hours. And just for fun, Tuesday is open, I believe, until I think it's 8:30. So the Tuesday of the last week before the election is open just a little bit later. If you ever need those hours again, of course, go to the Board of Elections website, and we're going to be putting those things out. So those hours are there for people when they're available. We already talked about being at the Board of Elections. And again, any voter who shows up to vote early in person is going to be able to do so. You don't need an excuse or anything like that. And you will be voting on the same voting units, machines that are out at the polls on Election Day. So if you prefer to vote that way, you absolutely can. Voters can request paper, but it's very rare. And then, of course, on Election Day, we have tons of people who just, no matter what, they're going to vote on Election Day, and we say that's great. The polls are open from 8:30 in the morning to 7:30 at night, and you're going to go to your neighborhood polling location, which we talked about earlier. If you're not sure where that's at, you're going to go to the Board of Elections website, you're going to look up your registration, and it's going to tell you what polling location you're going to need to go to. Again, any registered voter in Butler County can go to their polling location where they can vote on the machine. Again, they do have the option to vote on paper, but not very many people do that. Roughly, maybe 100 or so per election, and is not very many when we have tens of thousands in this election, hundreds of thousands of people in Butler County voting. We've got a little bit more information about those voting methods. So when you're going to request a ballot through the mail, you're going to need the last 4 numbers of your Social Security or your driver's license number, or a copy of both sides of your driver's license to be included when you return that absentee ballot. You can put it in the mail with a forever stamp and it'll return to us. You can put it in the drop box in the parking lot at the Board of Elections, or if you want to see us, come on in and you can return it in person in the lobby at the Board of Elections. Voting through the mail is a trackable method in Ohio. So if you go to our website and type in your information, you're going to be able to see when we issued your ballot. So if you've already sent in an application, you might already have a date there that we've entered your application and you're just waiting to receive it. You'll be able to see when we mailed your ballot and when you returned your ballot. There we go. And there's that last column it looks like I forgot about. There's no excuse required. For early in-person voting and in-person voting on Election Day, the rules are almost entirely similar. You're going to need to bring your photo ID. This is the first presidential election in Ohio since the new photo ID laws have been put in place. So anybody who's not thinking about bringing their photo ID definitely needs to do that now so that they can cast their ballot. If you don't have a photo ID when you show up to vote early in person or early at the polls on election day, you're going to receive one of those provisional ballots, and then you're going to have 4 days from the day of the election to come into the polling, into the Board of Elections and show us your ID so that we can take that provisional ballot from the no ID bucket and put it over into the valid bucket. Again, you're going to be able to cast your ballot on the voting machine, as most voters do. If you vote early in person, you will see issued and returned on the website. If you vote if you vote at the polling location, you're not going to be able to track your ballot because that all happens on election day, but your voter history will be updated to show that you voted in the election. Here we've got some vote by mail deadlines. So this is going to be really important for folks who want to vote that way. You can always request a ballot either 90 days before the election or on January 1st. So on presidential years, when the primary is in March, the 90-day deadline is in December of the previous year. So 90 days or January 1st is when you can send in an application, and you have until 7 days before the election. The date used to be a little closer. You could request until 3 days before the election. But if someone was requesting on Saturday to have a ballot, by the time we got it to the post office and it got delivered to them and they tried to return it, it was too late. So if you really haven't requested an absentee ballot by then, it was too late in the past. So you have 7 days. So the Tuesday before the election is the deadline to get that application to us. Returning a ballot by mail now has to be done within 4 days after the election, but it also has to have a valid postmark. If you're going to vote absentee, you must get a postmark of the day before the election. Okay, if a postmark comes back and you sent it on election day or after election day, unfortunately that ballot cannot be counted. Return in person. Of course, you can return your ballot in person. You can bring it to the drop box or you can bring it to the Board of Elections, but you would have to get it to the Board of Elections by 7:30 p.m. And at 7:30 p.m., we have a person out there who's going to lock our box so that nobody can put any more ballots in there. So if you're too late to get that postmark, we want to make sure that you get to the Board of Elections by 7:30. We've got a big red X there through returning it to the polling location, which sounds really convenient. However, under Ohio law, if you return your ballot to a polling location, it cannot be counted. So that's where you would need to make it to the Board of Elections that night. It's also good to point out that military and overseas voters do receive their ballots earlier than regular voters do, and that gives them some time when they're overseas to have a little bit of extra time to mail that ballot back and to receive it as well. After the election, there's a lot of work to do. Believe it or not, we don't just work 2 days a year on election day. We call canvassing is when we're going to basically take all the votes, add them up, and see which candidates won. The important thing for people to know is that there's official results and unofficial results. Unofficial results happen on election night, and they start being uploaded at 8 p.m., and then will be marked as 100% reporting, and those will be the unofficial results. After election night, what we do is we go through, we look at those provisional ballots, we see if there's any absentee ballots that have a proper postmark that come in after election day, and any of those valid ballots will be added to the official canvass. So you can know that we are expecting to see the results change from the unofficial to the official results because you know how that process works. The official canvass in Ohio has to be done 21 days after the election. So 3 weeks after the election is when every board must certify their results for that election. People like to know how the votes are counted. We have basically two types of ballots when it comes to how we count them. If you're voting through the mail on a piece of paper, we're going to open that piece of paper up. We're going to run it through a scanner. The scanner is going to look at that ballot and it's going to look at the marks you put on there and obviously add those up. When we talk about ballot adjudication, that is when, again, a bipartisan pair, usually myself and the other director, sit down and we will look at ballots and make sure how they're voted. So for example, you're supposed to fill that bubble in completely so that the machine can read it. However, some people put check marks or they might not fill it in all the way. So whenever the computer doesn't have confidence in that mark, it puts it in front of people. We can look at the picture of that ballot, or we may go get it out of its folder and review it and make sure that we can indicate how that voter meant to cast their ballot. If the director and I cannot make a determination on that, or we disagree, that's when that ballot's going to go to the board. Marianne and the other board members are going to have a chance to do that in open session at a Board of Elections meeting and determine that how that ballot was supposed to be counted. If a person's voting on a voting machine, those votes are going to be stored on a memory stick as well as on the piece of paper that prints out when the person's voting. And we're going to bring those memory sticks back. We're going to stick them into our computer and upload those results. Recounts are something an elections official never wants. We always want somebody to win big because recounts are a lot of extra work. But in Ohio, recounts happen automatically when the margin of error is less than 0.5%. So if it's a really close race, there's already going to be an automatic recount that happens. There's a whole bunch of rules on when they can be requested. But essentially, if it's close, there's already going to be an automatic recount that has to take place. Over the years, when we've done recounts, we've always found that the results have stayed the same, and I don't think we've ever seen a difference, and we hope that we can maintain that. We also audit after every election now in Ohio, so audits are required all the time, which is a great thing because then we can really have confidence in the results. And when we audit those results, what we want to do is we want to have a 100% accuracy rate. We want to know that the way the voter marked their ballot is the way that the system counted it. When we do that audit, we take the paper ballots and we take the paper from the voting machines, and we have two people of opposite parties sit across from each other, and they unroll those pieces of paper and they read the human readable text that's on there, and they'll do a little hand tick. So it is a hand audit recount process in Ohio. When I talk about reconciliation down there, to put it as simply as possible, if we have 100 people check into a voting location to vote, we want to make sure that we have 100 ballots. So of course, that's something that we always look into, make sure that we can account for those. There may be a note somewhere where someone, we've had people run out of the polling location, not finish their ballot. We track all those issues and make sure that we've got the right information there. And if anything doesn't look right, of course, we'll investigate that and figure out what the problem is so that we can be confident in those results. Okay, the Board of Elections, of course, is on social media. So we're trying to put out good information on Facebook so that people can be updated about the election, keep it in their mind, make a plan. And that's one of the most important things. If you haven't made a plan on when you're going to vote this election, go ahead and do that. Pick it now, because as soon as you make a plan, I think you're much more likely to commit to that, follow through, and make sure that your voice is going to be heard. I know that was really quick. We covered a lot of topics at a very high level. I hope you guys took something from that. But now I'll look and see if we have any questions in the chat and try to answer those as well.
And if you have a question, please unmute your mic. Any questions for Eric?
I do see one in the chat about, can you discuss the changes in ID requirements? The main change is the photo identification requirement. Most of the voters in Butler County prior to that were using either their driver's license or their state ID when they went to vote in person. However, just because it was most didn't mean it was all. So that's the most important thing. So you're going to bring that driver's license with you. That's the easiest one. It's the one most people have. You can bring a passport with you as well. That's another great form of ID. There's several military IDs that are available as well. And there's definitely resources if you really want to dig into all of them on voteohio.gov about ID requirements. They've got some posters there with some sample IDs that you can look at.
Eric, that's a change from the past, because I've run into people who said, yeah, I used to just take my phone bill or my utility bill in, and that used to be allowed, but that's changed, right?
That's correct.
So
that changed.
3 IDs you can use.
Yes, and that changed in, I believe, January of 2023. So again, this is the first presidential election where that's taking place.
I have a question.
Sure.
my daughter-in-law is registered. It looks like she's still registered for Ohio. They moved to Georgia, received an application for an absentee ballot.
Mhm.
And I want to know whether she has to do anything formally before she registers in Georgia. I know my son did. My son actually notified Butler County Board of Elections that he moved, but I don't think she's done that. Is that necessary before she actually registers in Georgia, or will it automatically negate?
There is not a cross-state network that will cancel voters in the way that we do have that for voters who are switching from one county to another. So the best thing for her to do would be to fill out a self-cancellation and send that into our office or drop it in our Dropbox so we could remove her name from the rolls. And then they can register in Georgia, which I'm not sure what the rules are there. So I'm sure she'll be able to find some good help at a board of elections there with the same type of people who want to make sure that she has her voice heard.
Right, because I was wondering if that would be considered fraud, if even though she's not voting here, she's still registered here. The Georgia laws consider that to be an act of fraud or something, you know?
Sure.
But they would know. Is that what you're saying?
There is a web of state and federal laws that come into play with this. The Board of Elections is not permitted to cancel a voter when they move out of state if we do not have an official notification from that voter or from that authority in the other state. But we don't always get those notifications. So if we've got an informed voter who's really concerned about this, I always want to encourage people to do a self-cancellation form. It's very easy that they can send.
All right. Thank you. I have another question.
Go right ahead.
I'm a different person. My question is, my daughter was registered here at home, and when she's in school in Texas, and when she moved to Texas, they required her to get a driver's license in Texas, and like on the spot, they registered her there in Texas. Well, she is moving back home this month, well, next week. And I want to find out, does she have to re-register here? She's still on the rolls here, or should she also cancel the registration in Texas? And when she does that, will she be okay to vote here? Because she's never voted in Texas. They just made her register when she got her license.
Sure. Again, I can't speak to the rules from Texas. I don't know the rules from Texas. But if she's coming here and she's going to vote in Ohio, again, I would recommend, I imagine Texas has a similar situation where she can cancel her registration there. But as long as she comes back here and updates or re-registers here prior to October the 7th, she would be considered an active voter who can vote in the November presidential election.
So she should still re-register even though she's still on the rolls here, and the address is the same.
Oh, if she is still currently registered in Ohio and the information is accurate, she wouldn't need to. But again, I would recommend that she cancel that record in Texas.
Okay, thank you.
There's a question in the chat about what would be required of a third party representation on the BOE. I guess that's talking about how we have Democrats and Republicans working on anything on each task. How would we get a third party in there? I'll be honest, I don't have an answer to that. What I do know is that in Ohio right now, the Democratic and Republican parties, as well as the Libertarian parties, have ballot access, which means they have enough people who are voting or enough people who have signed petitions to maintain that access to the ballot. Sometimes third parties sometimes lose that when they don't have enough participation. But that's a question I don't quite have a good answer for.
I want to ask a question. Greg, you posed that question. Did you mean working at the BOE or on the board? And how did you mean equal representation?
I meant in the state of Ohio, if there was a third party that wanted to have representation on the county boards, what would be required of them
So as a board member, a board position.
in order to qualify to have a member of that party serve on the board?
Okay, we can look into that because I think it might, Kevin, I don't know if you know, but it might be legislation is needed. I think right now in the ORC, it just specifies Democrats and Republicans. I can't look it up right now, but we can get back to you on that.
Thank you.
You bet. Any other questions? If you think of anything, one of the things I wanted to tell you is say, if any of you vote by mail, do not hesitate to send your ballot in as soon as possible. With those changes of mail-in dates, that's probably one of the most critical changes in HB 458, right? 458 that that occurred in terms of the timeliness of sending back in the mail. We used to have like 10 or 12 days after the election for ballots to come in. Now we only have 4 days. I would not hesitate at all. Once you get your mail-in ballot, fill it out, send it in. Anything else? All right, thank you so much for all your participation and your great questions. If you have anything else, you can send me an email or Eric an email. And I'll send those out to you guys through the Mobilize link. I really appreciate your attendance. I hope it was helpful for you. And please join me in thanking Eric for his wonderful presentation. And I'm sure you all love the money falling graphic. That'll be on his evaluation. Let me tell you that.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye.
so
It was
much.
very nice.